When you're out in the wilderness and an emergency hits, the clock starts ticking, fast. Those first few minutes, they can literally be the difference between life and death. Today, we're going to break down that critical window, the primary care sequence, and how to handle choking. This isn't just about memorizing a list, it's a lifeline. So let's get right into it.
So, why all the urgency? Well, it comes down to a really stark fact. A person can go for weeks without food and days without water, but without oxygen, you've only got about 3 minutes. 3. Every single second you spend figuring out what to do is a second that person doesn't have. That number, right there, drives everything we're about to talk about. And that's exactly why having a plan is not just a nice idea, it's everything. Those first few minutes are absolutely critical for survival. You know, in an emergency, panic and chaos are the real enemies. A clear, step-by-step system is what gives that person a fighting chance. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to master the HHH-CAB checklist. That's our essential framework. Then we'll hit the single most important question you have to ask. After that, we'll break down how to deal with choking, and we'll cover something called the stable position. And we'll wrap it all up with a recap of the core principles you have got to remember.
I want you to think of the HHCAB sequence, like a pilot's pre-flight checklist. It's this reliable, systematic tool that's designed to cut right through the confusion and panic. It makes sure you handle the biggest threats to life in the right order every single time.
And here it is, the whole thing, HHCAB. That stands for hazards, hello, help, then circulation, airway, and breathing. This little mnemonic, this is your core framework for navigating the first few moments of any major emergency. So let's break down what each of these really means. But first, let's be super clear on what we're actually doing here. Primary care, it's not about diagnosing the problem or fixing a broken bone. It's about one thing, and one thing only: stopping the things that could kill the patient in the next few minutes. That's it. Everything else has to wait. So here's the absolute #1 rule, and it might sound a little strange. The sequence starts with you, not the patient. Think about it. You can't help anybody if you get hurt yourself, right? So before you rush in, you stop. You look around. Are there any hazards to you, to others at the scene, or to the patient? Your safety is totally non-negotiable.
Now, as part of that initial safety sweep, there's one thing you're looking for in the patient immediately. You got to remember, the two fastest killers out there are a blocked airway and massive, catastrophic bleeding. So once you know the scene is safe for you, your eyes immediately scan for any major bleeding. If you see it, you DLF it. Right then, right there.
Okay, so hazards are checked, catastrophic bleeding is controlled. We've now arrived at the single most important decision you're going to make in this entire sequence. This is the big fork in the road.
This is the second H for hello. It's where you do the classic tap and tuck. You get down, you tap them firmly on the shoulder, and you shout something like, "Hey, are you okay?" And as you're doing that, you're looking, listening, and feeling for any signs of normal breathing. The answer to this one question, are they breathing, is going to determine everything you do next.
In this slide just lays it out perfectly. There are two paths, and only two. If the patient is breathing normally, you stop. That's right, you stop the primary care sequence right there. You don't need to do CAB, you move on to what's called secondary care. But if they are not breathing, you keep going immediately. There's no pause, no hesitation. Let's really hammer this home. If that person is not breathing, the sequence is set in stone. The hello step told you they're unresponsive and not breathing. Your very next move is the third H, help. You point at someone, you tell them to call for help. Get that professional response started. Then, once help is on the way, you start CAB. You might be wondering, wait, why C first? Shouldn't we open their airway? And it's a great question, but the logic is really powerful. See, when someone's heart stops, there's still a little bit of oxygen left in their blood. The most critical job is to get that oxygenated blood moving to the brain, right now. And that's what compressions do. They circulate what's left. Then, you open the airway and give breaths to put more oxygen back in. Circulation, airway, breathing.
Okay, so let's switch gears and talk about a very specific situation where the airway is the #1 problem from the get-go: choking. This is where someone isn't breathing because of a physical blockage.
You need to know these signs cold. The most obvious is the universal sign, both hands clutching at the throat. But also look for this. They can't speak, they can't cough, they can't make any sound. Their face might get red and then start to change color. You'll see panic in their eyes. These are all alarm bells telling you that you need to act now.
So what you do next depends entirely on one thing. Are they conscious?
If they're awake but can't breathe or talk, your goal is to pop that object out using abdominal thrusts, the Heimlich maneuver. But if that person passes out and becomes unresponsive, the plan changes completely. You immediately start CPR. Why? Because the chest compressions will circulate blood and they might actually dislodge the object.
And this is so important. This is a huge what not to do. Let's say you're doing CPR on someone who is choking. Before you give a rescue breath, you'll quickly look in their mouth. If you can see the object, sure, you can try to hook it out. But if you can't see anything, you must never, ever just stick your fingers in their throat and sweep around blindly. You could easily push that blockage even deeper.
So let's circle back. What happens when you've done your primary care, you've handled the big threats, and now you have a patient who is unconscious, but they are breathing on their own? We can't just leave them lying flat on their back. This is where the stable position, or the recovery position, comes into play.
The whole point of this position is simple, but it's absolutely vital. It keeps their airway open and safe. See, if they're on their back and they vomit or have fluid in their mouth, they could choke on it. By rolling them into this position, you're letting gravity do the work, allowing any fluid to drain out. It's a simple move that protects their airway while you monitor them and wait for help.
All right, that was a ton of critical information, so let's boil it all down to the absolute must-know principles that you need to have locked in when the pressure's on. Look, if you forget everything else, please remember these 5 things. 1. Your safety is first, always. Check for hazards. 2. Whether or not the patient is breathing is your big fork in the road. 3. If they're not breathing, the order is always help, then CAB. 4. If someone is conscious and choking, you act fast. And 5. An unconscious person who is breathing goes in the recovery position. That's your foundation.
Okay, now that we've walked through all the principles, let's do a quick check to see what stuck. I've got 3 multiple choice questions for you. Think them through.
All right, question number 1. What is the very first step a first responder must take at an emergency scene? The answer is B. Always assess for hazards first. Your safety is number 1. Okay, question 2. You find someone who is unconscious but breathing normally. What do you do? The correct answer is B again. They're breathing, so your primary care is done. You move on to secondary care, which includes putting them in that recovery position. And finally, number 3. When treating a conscious adult with a complete airway obstruction, what's the action? That's right. It's B. Perform the Heimlich maneuver.
So, let's end on this note. Today wasn't just about learning a list of steps, was it? It was about understanding the why C comes before A and B, why the breathing question is such a critical fork in the road. So I'll leave you with this to think about. How does knowing that why empower you to act, not just with skill, but with calm and decisive confidence when every single second truly matters? Thanks for joining me.